Anton Krieger here. This episode of All Things Green is brought to you by NextGen Clean Energy Solutions, your sustainability easy button from concept to completion. Welcome to All Things Green. I'm Anton, and today I'm joined by a very special guest. Justin Ol Husher owns a Pawpaw farm out in Ohio. He also grows other indigenous fruits. Husher, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Anton. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so I kind of met you a few years ago. You started off as my Pawpaw dealer, but I actually never got the story from you of how you got into sustainability.
It's been a long and windy road.
Okay.
And for the longest time, I've always, been into sustainability. I went to high school in the 90s, was the treasurer of my class. And when we had to give a present to the school with, the money that we made from selling candy bars or whatever, it was my idea to give the school recycle bins. So I feel like that kind of was the start. And then went to college for botany, kind of always wanting to get into a farm-based situation.
Yeah.
Thought it was always going to be a mushroom farm. And I also thought it was always going to be kind of in a rural setting. I thought I was going to get bored with city life, and by the time I was 30 or 40, I'd be done with rock and roll and done with microbrew beer and done with fancy restaurants. And alas, none of those things ever happened.
Here you are in Cleveland, Lakewood, Ohio.
Cleveland and Lake, kind of a little bit of both, but I do live in Lakewood and used to farm out of Cleveland. And in 2008, that was the housing crash.
Yeah.
And that was also the year I got my finance MBA. Woohoo!
Yeah.
And lo and behold, I got this MBA, thought I was going to be making a lot of money, and there was basically zero jobs to be had upon graduation. It was sort of like the opposite, the antithesis of everything you go to college for. At that time, farming was starting to take root. Urban farming was taking root in Cleveland with, what's that guy's name? Carl Scalak was doing some stuff. I think Pete McDermott might have been doing some stuff at that point, and a couple other, what's that woman's name? Jess something or another. Anyway, there was starting to be murmurs of urban farming in Cleveland, Ohio. And at that point, I was having a hard time getting a job and saw these kind of like opportunities to start farming, and kind of fell into a grant program that got me started farming on West 130th of Cleveland, Ohio.
That's really cool.
In 2010.
Yeah, so the housing crash happened, and maybe there was some like derelict or like damaged properties that people were trying to turn into urban spaces, urban farms. And maybe your farm wasn't that in particular, but that's kind of the general scene.
That is, that is the gist. There was a lot of land bank properties. There still are a lot of land bank properties that the city wanted people to do something ideally green with. Yeah. And there were opportunities to even like put in like permeable paver parking lots, farms, I think like swale rain garden types of things. And again, I had thought I would be bored with rock and roll and mostly rock and roll. And I was excited that these opportunities were existing because the job market in 2008, 2009, 2010 was quite horrible. Yeah. And I wanted to do this at any rate. And that's kind of where I got started. Yeah. Along the way, I ended up working for a soil and water conservation district, and along the way, I planted a lot more trees than what my initial vision of like fruits and vegetables have been. And I think that is perhaps a better path towards sustainability is, food-based trees and annual farming. But to each their own. I like the trees a little bit more.
Let's talk about it then. So you have 2 plots in Lakewood, Ohio.
Yes.
These are, would you consider urban farms?
My Cleveland friends might not, but I consider my 2 Lakewood orchards to be urban, farm plots. Yes. They're about 5,000 square foot apiece. They're about 45 trees apiece.
Wow.
They put out, nearly anywhere from like 600 to 2,000 pounds of Pawpaws every year, and I take that to the bank.
Yeah, that's those small plots are something that really pays dividends for you, and I think it's also really cool. Like something that I have admired is you took those properties that could have been built on, and you are using them as a conservation measure, which is really cool.
Well, they can still be built on.
Yes.
They can, but it is nice to use them as a conservation-based farm in the present time. Absolutely. I may be selling one for that very purpose, development in the future.
Which is cool because you recently had bought a other farm in Oberlin.
Yes. So back in 2020, right before the pandemic, my wife and I, we bought 20 acres outside of Oberlin. And that is what in our household we called the farm, whereas the Lakewood orchards we call the orchards. So when we're arguing semantics about where I'm going to be and where I'm going to be pruning, if I'm pruning out in Oberlin, that's at the farm. If I'm pruning in Lakewood at the orchards, that's the orchards.
Yeah.
So again, that's kind of internal dialogue that my wife and I had to develop so we can figure out where I'm going and what the heck I'm talking about some of the time.
Yeah, yeah. So like pawpaws are like your bread and butter on some of these orchards, these urban plots. But I also know that you farm various indigenous fruits at the new farm.
Yeah, so the farm, the big farm's called Old Husher's Indigenous Orchards, which is an acronym that is
OH.
I.
Oh.
Ohio, and oh my gosh, it takes people so long to get that sometimes. But that's okay. Indigenous is not a word you hear every day. I think that's the one that throws them. So Old Husher's Indigenous Orchards, the 20 acres, we focus on native North American fruiting plants. What you said is absolutely 100% correct. The pawpaws are the bread and butter. Those are going to make up the bulk of the farm. Right now, there's about 500 pawpaw trees planted, but not a close second, but a distant second. We're also going to be focusing on American persimmons, which we have about 100 of those in the ground right now, with 100 more going in this year, 2024. There's also a northern ripening pecan patch, and there's also a little section called Husher's Hickory Haven. Those are two different sections, even though the pecan is in fact a hickory. Then there's some secondary stuff like a couple hundred elderberries and some aronia, and then sort of some what I kind of call like foraging / kind of like novelty North American fruits that are used kind of like as windbreaks. So there's extensive like windbreak usage of the American plum, some usage of like the high bush cranberry, also the black haw viburnum. So we do a lot of that kind of stuff as well, but those are kind of more meant to be showcased rather than be for a monetary effort, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And why indigenous fruits?
Why? Well, there's money in them trees. So,
Sure.
first and foremost is if you're going to be a farmer, you do need to figure out how to make money. All this sustainability stuff is cool, but at the end of the day, if you're not making cash, is it really sustainable?
Yeah. That's charity. That's not a business.
Yeah, so you see a lot of farms kind of develop into education or nonprofit type status, and that basically means you can't earn a keep as a farmer. Like, I'm not trying to be mean, but that's kind of what it means.
Yeah, yeah.
So there is a lot of money in these fruits, especially in the pawpaws. They're very high yielding and they're very high dollar. That being said, not a lot of people, us gringos have been in North America for at least 400 years. And what did we do? We came here and we planted apples, and we came here and planted pears, and we came here and planted European plums. And that's fine, but we never taken into account what's already here.
Yeah.
And a lot of these types of fruits, apples, pears, plums, have a lot of inputs that are not natural. So they're sprayed. A lot of spraying goes on with apple trees. A lot of spraying goes on with pears. And there are ways to do these things organically, but they're kind of a pain. It's kind of tough. It's kind of extra work. So you have a fruit that has basically been not developed, not commercialized yet. And I say a fruit, but in all intents and purposes, it's fruits. Like pawpaws haven't been really developed, persimmons haven't really been developed. Any of the viburnums like the high bush cranberry or the black haw have not been developed. And they're sitting here as a natural resource, kind of waiting to be developed in some way. And a lot of times they do have a lot of less, natural predators. So your inputs in your work to do things like spraying, or you don't have to do that anymore.
Yeah. So less energy going into it, less chemicals, and a higher yield.
Higher yield is to be determined, but
Okay.
everything else, persimmons are known to be one of the most caloric yielding fruits anywhere. And they do it with sheer volume of fruit, and then also just a lot of sugar.
Yeah.
So, and that for persimmons, 100%. For pawpaws, again, they yield very well, but I've never compared it in terms of pounds to apples, so we're just gonna have to go on faith on that one.
Well, we got old Husher right here in front of us.
Yes,
I would
you do, man.
I would love to hear.
Aren't you lucky?
I would love to hear about letting the viewers know what a pawpaw really is. What does it taste like?
Oh man, a pawpaw. What does it taste like? That's like a $20 million question. A lot of people will tell you it tastes like a banana meets a mango meets a papaya all kind of together, and not at all like that at the same time. The very simplest way to say it is it's very tropically in its flavor profile with those things I just described, sort of background. It's very custardy in its texture. Sometimes people are kind of off-put by its texture. And when I say pudding, or I say pudding-like, and you can almost eat them like a pudding cup if you cut them in half and get a spoon and just suck them down. So, but it's a unique taste that is its own. It's pawpaw. It is what it is. It's very tropically and kind of tastes like those things all together, but not like those things at all at the same time. You've eaten quite a few. What do you think?
Oh, my view on it, I would also agree with the banana and mango flavors. When you get one of those more wild seedling pawpaws, I feel like you almost get like weirder notes, like maybe like vanilla or coffee or like, I don't know, something like that.
There are a lot of different notes. So some of them have been bred to have a pina colada flavor, or not bred, but more picked out because it has a pina colada flavor. There's a new one called marshmallow, another one called cantaloupe. And I haven't had these yet, but I'm excited to try their flavors. There's ones that, again, have like coconutty aftertastes, and vanilla, caramel, all those kinds of things.
And what I love about all these different flavors that we're talking about is buddies of yours, people like yourself, peers to each other, mentors to each other. You guys are all kind of working on these and trying to kind of breed. I don't know if breed is the right word, but fuse different flavors and create different things of pawpaw.
There have been a lot of pawpaw breeders over the last 30 years that have done a lot of great work in terms of the flavor profiles of the pawpaws, and both flavor combined with yield. Excuse me. My friends aren't focused on breeding so much, though there are a lot of people doing that, but there are focused on getting the good genetics through things like scion-wood trades out there, so that we do have all these different good to great pawpaws in everybody's hands, so that they don't go extinct, and that we can, in future trade them, in future breed them for sure. This year, 2024, I plan on planting 600, 700 trees at the farm. And this year, I'm kind of having a new layout. You've been out to the farm a couple times.
Yeah.
And the trees are going to get a lot closer. And ultimately, only half of them are going to get grafted into their own cultivars. And the other half are going to be, let's see if there is a future cultivar here.
Wow.
So it's sort of, and the ones that end up sucking are going to get cut and then grafted into at a later time. So there's kind of like this new plan to both do breeding work and to do, it's not even breeding work. It's because I haven't put the cultivars together to breed. It's more selection work from these good, genetics coming together.
Yeah.
Like there's people who actually like take, pollen from here and put it there. And that's, a lot more control. I consider that breeding. What I'm doing is just having good stock and
Yeah.
then hopefully finding some good stuff.
You're letting fate decide.
In that stock. Yes, yes, that is exactly it. With, I'm manipulating it a little bit by having it come from good genetics.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
that, I guess I'm doing a little bit of work. But again, I don't consider that breeding.
Well, tell me a little bit about how you get Pawpaws to the consumers. I mean, this is a fruit that, in my experience,
man.
it bruises easily, it spoils quick. Tell me about how you can get indigenous fruits to the community.
Well, that is a great question. I'll tell you what I do, but I need to, in the future, probably start stepping up. So as we all know, pawpaws are very perishable. They don't hold well. They bruise easily. All those kinds of things. At the end of the day, honestly, oftentimes a great pawpaw kind of looks like crap. It's bruised, it's beat up, it's soft, and American consumers aren't really into that. Me personally, I live in the most population dense city between New York and Chicago, or at least that's what I've been told for 20 years, called Lakewood, Ohio. And Lakewood residents typically are relatively educated and are not hyper local, but they care about those kinds of things. So most of my sales now are all through just Facebook posts where I harvest on a daily basis, post availability on a daily basis, and take orders on a daily basis for people to come pick off my front porch. It's not probably going to be the best solution in a long run. Right now I have about 75 yielding trees, and this works now for my scale. When the 1,000 trees come into fruition at the big farm, we're going to have to work on something different. But I have done the Tremont Farmers Market. They've always been really good at working with me as being like a part-time vendor. So that's been great. And then I have some folks like Mason's Creamery and Lucky's that particularly Mason's in a pinch. And when I have a glut of pawpaws, they will be the shining knight. They'll be like, yes, we will take 60 pounds today. Yes, we'll do that for you, and we will clean those up. So thanks to those guys.
And make ice cream out of it.
And make ice cream out of them as well, which is really, really awesome. And I know that's been a very popular feature for their September sales.
I think it's amazing. Like starting out, you got your MBA. You said that the job market wasn't great, and you just decided to become an entrepreneur. And
that's the thing. So way back in the late '90s, I got a botany degree, and I feel like my graduations have always coincided with what is that word that seems to plague my generation? Probably your generation too. Recession. Recession. So in '98, I got this degree, and it was hard to turn it over into a botany job. Like modern life modern life has its issues, but for younger adults today, there are so many more opportunities for things like internships and networking that it is unbelievable how, I wouldn't say easy it is to get experience, but experience is easier to be found. And in the late 90s, I ended up getting a banking job. And through a lot of the aughts, I ended up having banking jobs. But if you ever hung out with me, you may figure out pretty quickly that banking is not an industry for me.
yeah,
Bankers, they're not my peeps.
they're not.
I don't want to talk about golf. I don't want to, Anyway, that is kind of what I imagine as bankers, these guys who talk about golf. And I had one dude, this banker, that he figured out that it was mathematically in his best interests to buy plastic utensils and throw them away every day rather than buy like a silverware set and clean it. And, for all intents and purposes, again, that's like the exact opposite of sustainability. This is the exact opposite of the kind of people I want to know and or hang out with. So the whole time I was working at banks, kind of as an underling, but even underlings at banks get paid well. You get good vacation. You get, you get benefits. You get, banks, they get great, holidays. And I'm like, if I'm going to be a lackey at a bank, I might as well not be a lackey at a bank. I might as well get an MBA because the bank was willing to pay for it. But the whole time, I didn't feel like I was right, or I didn't feel good about going to school for banking. And the whole time I'm doing finance, I can do the numbers, I can crunch numbers, But the whole time it always felt like funny money. Like why are we hedging in the first place to manage risk? Why don't we just take on good assets? But saying those things in a finance class, you're kind of a pariah. Then during my finance class where they're like, investment banking is the pillar of our society and Lehman Brothers is going down. So all the stuff that inherently I felt was funny money was being proven to me every day within, Lehman Brothers and all these financial firms just tanking. And then the American government bailing them out, which they're not also supposed to do by hard and fast banking terms.
Well,
so it was a blessing that there was a recession. I never wanted to be a banker or a golfer, but that is what was being presented to me. And then when this opportunity came to start farming in Cleveland, I was very grateful to switch gears, though it's taken some trials and tribulations, and there's been some learning curve along the way.
Well, I think there's a lot of people who maybe go for a degree that maybe they end up being like, I don't really know that I want to pursue something in this field. And thankfully, there are people who are providing internship opportunity experience, people who want to get their feet wet in sustainability and learn more about it. I wanted to ask if you had any opportunities off the top of your head.
Well, I do want to, this year I want to institute a formal internship program at the farm. That would be a very, very kind of like part-time thing, like one shift, like 1 8-hour shift a month for like 16 to 18 months. Mm-hmm. So not like a 20-hour or 30-hour a week. It would be what I would call like project-based. So instead of some of the day-to-day doldrums of farming, it would be like, okay, we're getting this project done. Mm-hmm. And I need a second hand particularly for that. So I am, going to be formally instituting an internship, maybe even tomorrow. Seeking that. I'm always looking for help. Anybody can dig a hole and hang out and eat some chicken wings grilled afterwards is welcome to lend a hand. There's going to be some work parties coming up at the farm that are more, we like to party at the Old Husher's Indigenous Orchard. So, when we do the work parties, we do make it fun for the individuals that come out and hang out and have a good time. And, again, we do get some stuff done. But again, it's meant to be a social event. It's meant to be a fun event.
And that's the cool thing about farming and communities and even in urban spaces, but not always urban spaces, is people get to come together, people who have like-minded interests. I've met so many people through your types of events that you've hosted that I have admired and have been able to continue to connect. Joe King is actually one particular guest.
Joe's one of my favorites, man.
Yeah, Joe was on the podcast many episodes ago, but somebody that I was able to connect with. And so I would just recommend looking for your local Indigenous orchard and finding a way to get plugged in, because helping farmers is the best thing you can do.
We always need help. Every farmer out there can always use a hand. We are overworked and underpaid, but we do it because, we love it. We find a certain kind of peace while doing that. It makes our brains still. And it does feel good to grow trees and transform, especially the big farm or even the Lakewood orchards. You take kind of a disused property and transform it into something that should yield for a very, very long time. The big farm was a corn bean field, and they sprayed it every year, they seeded it every year, they did all those kinds of things on an annual basis, and the soil is very compacted because of the big tractors. And to see kind of new life, to see the kingfishers, to see even new types of mushrooms popping up in different places that just never, up until kind of just recently, I hadn't seen yet in my 4 years there. It feels like I'm on a good track.
Yeah, farming in a restorative way.
Yeah, in a very as restorative as possible. I tell people I'm an imperfectionist at heart. Generally, if I'm operating at about a 70-80% of my output value, I'm getting a lot of stuff done, and there might be a little bit of mistake along the way, but I'm okay with that. When I'm operating at like 95 to 100%, like nothing's getting done. There's too much thought process, and there's too much stress on the perfectionist qualities of operating at a high level. So I say I'm a perfectionist. A couple years back, I put in 3.5 acres of a pollinator a pollinator plot. It was for monarch butterflies, but it had a bunch of different species included in this. And, I felt, I feel bad saying this, but I do believe life is about a gray area and life is not steadfast in our choices. And for that 3 acres of prep, I used, a horrible product named glyphosate to do my prep. And that I needed a clean seed bed for, putting down new seeds. And my options were basically some type of, pesticide, some type of tilling. I guess naturally I could have set it on fire, but my farm is super windy and getting involved in burning 3 acres was more than something I wanted to do. So I feel the long run value of spraying once to create a sterile seed bed for these pollinators was worth it. Do I like doing it? No. Was it gross? Yes. Would I recommend it? Depends what you want to do. But for many years, not many years, but for about 3 or 4 years, I worked at the local soil and water conservation district, where they would sometimes partner, or sometimes our partners would do a lot of rehabs of sites. And it is there where, I would see these big kind of projects by, people like the sewer district, where they would use some type of glyphosate spray in order to create future habitat. And that's where I kind of initially softened, is like, if this kind of like one-off is going to create this, thing that was better than it has been, I'm not going to say I'm 100% for it, but I see that as a tool to create new habitat.
Yeah. Well, we are running out of time.
Are we already?
I wanted to ask you one more thing about the Ohio Pawpaw Festival.
Oh, man.
If you could plug the Ohio Pawpaw Festival and let our viewers know any other things you'd like to plug.
So Ohio Pawpaw Fest has been going on for 26 years now. So I think 1999, 1998. It's in Athens, Ohio. I've been going since 2009, so this will be my 15th year. It's always the third weekend of September, which turns out September 13th and the 15th, through the 15th rather, this year. Most years, not most, but the last 4 or 5 years I've been a presenter. Even though it is a kind of rural-based festival, they draw from a lot of city crowds. And my Lakewood orchards, basically, I get a little bit of prime time. I get Saturday at 1 o'clock in the afternoon to do a presentation on urban orcharding. And that's generally pretty well filled. But it's a fest to celebrate all things pawpaw. And it also, there's underneath the pawpaws, there are native plants are celebrated. It is Athens, so just general freakdom is also celebrated. So it's always good to see the locals down there. There's some of my favorite people in all Ohio are in Athens at Pawpaw Fest. There's bands, there's ice cream, there's trees, there's tie-dye shirts. There's all those kinds of things at Pawpaw Fest.
It's a great time.
Oh, man, is it? And, let's plug yourself, dude. I am talking right now to the 2-time Pawpaw eating champion of Pawpaw Fest. So
you're going to make me blush.
Steep Myosic, Cavaliers. We got Anton here, 2-time world champ.
I did bring a couple championships to Cleveland.
Oh, man, you're making me proud, dude. I love it.
Well, is there anybody else you'd like to plug?
But yeah, man. So, this Pawpaw thing has been a long and windy road, and there's been a lot of good folks who've helped me out. One of my first and foremost, my good buddy, Adam Hughes, he and I installed my first orchard together down in Athens, Ohio. But then this dude, Adam, and I, we went to the 4th International Pawpaw Conference in Kentucky back in 2016, where I met a lot of good folks, but a lot of really good Hoosiers, if you will. A lot of good folks from Indiana.
Yeah.
So like my good friend Bob Johnson from Nectar Flow Farms, he's been both a mentor and a peer. Chris Gonzo of Worry Gone Farms, he's always been so helpful in answering questions. Darren Bender Beauregard from Brambleberry Farms, he has one of the best nurseries of really anybody I know for these native plants and figs and some weirdo stuff too. And then just kind of like my local, my local, what do you call that? not sponsorship, I'm brain farting.
Partners.
Word.
Your partners.
My local partners,
Your
yes.
partners.
Yeah, so Mason Creamery has been one of the big ones, but Lucky's in Tremont's been there too. Tremont Farmers Markets has always been helpful for the days I need to get to the market, and that's always been kind of a crash and burn thing, not for Tremont Farmers Market, for me. Like, I need to come in today, is that cool? And they've always been like, yes, we love your Pawpaws. So,
Awesome.
People who are willing to work with me on a very short notice, I've always been grateful for those types of people. And the Farmers Market Tremont's always been there for me.
Well, Justin, I have just one more question.
One more.
It's important.
Okay.
Does your son call you Pawpaw?
No, he doesn't. He doesn't. He calls me Dad most of the time.
What else does he call you?
We'll not get into that on this right now.
All right. Well, I'm going to let our viewers know how they can stay in touch with us. But thank you so much for talking about things
thanks
with
for having
me.
me, man. I appreciate it.
If you'd like to stay connected with the show, be sure to follow us on TikTok at ATG Show. And if you'd like to rewatch full episodes, check out our YouTube channel, All Things Green Show. You can find all of our sources from today's episode in the show notes. All Things Green will be back at the same time next week. Thank you so much for being a part of the global sustainability movement.